indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would take a motion to approve the regular agenda as presented.
So moved.
There's been a motion by Sean. Is there a second?
Second.
And second by Bruce. Any other questions or discussions on this? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay, so we're gonna start off with the 2024 budget discussion.
Okay, before I start, I'll say ignore the mountain of cough drops. I'm coming off an illness, and if I don't consume them constantly, then my throat gets just scratchy enough that I'll be coughing uncontrollably. But that being said, we got this packet out Thursday, and I know there wasn't a ton of time to look at stuff, but hopefully you were at least able to peruse over the top of it. Much of my recommendations haven't really changed, I guess, since August. As I do believe many of the projects and things we are doing are needed as the city is growing and, for better or for worse, is growing while everyone else around us is growing. So most of this first memo really does speak to attachment 1 of your packet, which is a brief overview of all of the changes that have kind of happened in the budget since we first began. That first meeting was back in August, and that August information should be in black in that overview. And then as updates were made, they changed from blue to green and now purple. And then the actual budget sheets themselves would be attachments 2, 2.1 and 2.2, just your EDA stuff. So if you'd like, I can kind of generally go through that overview, or if you guys have all read through it and have specific questions, I would rather not keep us here for 6 hours tonight if we can help it, but I do definitely want to.
That's because the Green Bay game's on tonight?
No, is it?
Right,
I didn't even
yes.
know
No, I wasn't
that.
gonna make a comment about that, and I'm still trying not to get excited about the Packers this
No,
year.
I didn't
but-
even know that, so.
7:15, I'm out of here.
Well, I mean, if
That's okay.
If Maggie's leaving, I'm at one point, yeah.
We still have a quorum.
I got one question, that debt levy, so our debt levy every year is about $861,000.
Not every year. So our debt levy for 2023 was 821 and change. I don't
And
know
it's
the
gonna
exact
go
number.
up here in
And
the next few years.
This year, it's going up about $40,000. I would expect as we bring bonds on over the next couple of years for that to be added to. But if you also look at the schedule, which I have in, what attachment is that? It does start to drop off. We have a number of payments that while the debts themselves don't drop off, the way the payments were set up, the payments start dropping off quite significantly over the next couple of years.
Yep, I saw that one, but that's, when I originally asked for that, that was the thing that I was looking for, how much,
Yep.
just that's, okay, perfect.
Okay. So I guess, how would the council like me to go through this? If not, I can just kind of briefly run through the overview, which kind of hits on the major points that I believe are in there.
Well, hit on the major points.
All right, that'll work. So the one change that I do really have in here from the original budget and kind of over the past budget meetings is with the extensive discussion that has really taken place on the compensation of employees. I believe at this point it may be wise, if that is something we really want to dig into, to look at doing a full compensation study. I know the last one that was done back in 2020 was a wage-only study where they took the job descriptions and positions as they are and graded them out based on the various market decisions that were laid out in that study, which I also have in your packet for you. Before that, it was 2014, and speaking to our resident historian, Ken Ondich, he said in 2014 that in fact was a full comp study where they did look at do job description updates and that sort of thing. So it may be time, if we're looking to do one, to actually do the full thing to make sure our job descriptions are actually up to date, the wages are up to date, and we can all agree with how people are getting paid, as well as the benefits that people are being provided, because many ways the benefits are part of your total compensation package. So that's kind of the one big change I have in the budget from what would have been the last ones you've seen. Otherwise, diving into revenues, Tax levy, we all kind of know at this point where that's gonna land. We're looking at potentially not passing or certifying a levy, which would land us at last year's levy.
And what was that again? I did,
Last year's levy would have been $4,824,628.
okay,
If we were to,
But that was an increase of what, over 2021?
that was an increase of 3.61% over 2022.
Or, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, looking at that, that leaves us $223,070 short. If we take into account the recommended $40,000 for the comp study, that leaves us $263,070 short from revenues and expenditures. Now, just hitting highlights, going through that overview sheet, our LGA did increase by $197,000 roughly this year, and that has been into the budget since the beginning. The first thing that we come into a change for this particular budget proposal is looking at interest income. Now, I've stated in past meetings that I don't traditionally recommend budgeting very much off of interest income due to the volatility of interest from year to year. It does, if you start working that into your operating revenues, you could potentially see hundreds of thousands of dollars of losses or swings from year to year that you're trying to make up in an operating budget. That being said, this year we were looking at budgeting $50,000 of interest to help kind of offset some of the potential tax increases. $50,000 is roughly 1%. And we do know that we will receive about another $75,000 towards the general fund in interest in 2024. So to help offset the shortfall, I would recommend budgeting that $75,000 of interest into there. And I am on the bottom of page 2 of the memo. Almost, that does take our deficit from 263,000 down to 188,000. And at any point, if you guys want to speak to any of these, you can certainly stop me. Otherwise, I'll just keep rolling. Fund balance, as I've kind of looked at where the city stands across the various general fund departments, I am conservatively estimating that we'll realize about a $95,000 surplus. When you look at the change sheet, it does say 90,000. That's when I looked at it a few weeks ago, and as other stuff's we've gotten closer to the end of the year, I do think 95 is a little bit
more accurate.
It's still quite conservative, but it is getting more accurate at that point. So that $95,000, I believe, similar to interest, I would not in a normal year recommend putting that on the operating budget because you never know when you'll have a surplus or not. But for this one time, I would recommend a one-time use to bridge the gap, and that gets us to a $93,000 deficit per the top of page 3 of the memo. The Public Works, this is more of a highlight. We've kind of known it since early October. We do have to reduce our county road maintenance by about $3,300 because when we used to get a snowplow allowance from Scott County for Columbus, and when we took over Columbus, we no longer get that allowance from them. So that is a reduction that we've known about since early October, so that doesn't really do anything. I guess, are there any questions on the revenue proposals at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. Looking at expenses, this is the other one where we can start looking. Certainly over the years, the city has kept taxes or the tax levy increases very low. Attachment 4 kind of shows from 2020 or 2012 to 2021. The city did not actually increase its tax levy by more than 2.95% in any given year. And while that is certainly commendable, the city was realizing commercial and residential growth at that time. And I believe by keeping it low, the city wasn't always taking advantage of that growth to complete projects. The tax rate did drop from 74.5% to just over 51%, as can be seen in attachment number 5. Looking at attachment number 6, it mirrors attachment 4, except updates it over the last couple years, and the city has certainly increased its tax higher than traditionally over the last few years. And while it certainly has increased its tax levy rate, some of that rate has been realized within new homes and businesses. And so residential taxes especially have not necessarily grown by that same rate that the overall tax levy has increased for the city. I do believe as the city grows and looks to fund parks and trails, business retention through EDA projects, infrastructure, we're certainly going to need a revenue, and so the pursuit to keep the tax levy as low as possible some years is going to have to be let go a little bit as the city looks to invest, and that's why the budget that remains in front of you tonight is largely similar to what it was in August, as I believe that continues to lay a solid foundation for keeping projects on pace that allow us to compete with other cities who are making investments. The first one, I know will probably be one of the hot button ones. A proposed increase for wages and benefits across the general fund are looking at a total of $269,000 or 6.6%. This comes with a COLA of 4% to all city positions, and there's a few reasons why I still recommend 4%. And looking at attachment 7, it became evident over the last couple of years that inflation has certainly taken off across the Midwest, the U.S., and I guess also through Social Security. In past meetings, I know it's been stated that the city certainly increased COLAs 2 and 3% in years when inflation was next to not moving. But in 2020, the city council did commission a compensation study, which I included as part of this packet, number 8. And when approved in the spring of 21, I guess in my reading of compensation studies, it certainly reset the bar with where the wages should be, according to the market. Generally, in my mind, the cost of living is both kind of helping reset salaries for inflation as well as against your market cities to try to keep you competitive. And so in 2021, that bar was really reset and becomes the new benchmark for where it should move from there. And so if you move from there, since 2021, the city has certainly been outpaced by inflation across the U.S. and the Midwest, and certainly by Social Security. I believe a 4% adjustment doesn't fully make up for that. I don't think it's trying to necessarily fully make up, but it does at least keep it closer with inflation. Year-to-date information that I was able to pull this last week, they've got through September, and inflation across the Midwest is estimated at about 3.7%. So I think a 4% COLA does track pretty closely with that inflation rate. I know moving forward, well, many of my COLA recommendations will be coming straight from looking at inflation rates across the U.S. and the Midwest to give us kind of a better benchmark of where to stand at. But go ahead.
My question is, so we have steps included as well. So there is raises that are given.
Correct.
And then we do this cost of living on top of it. And now we want to spend more money on another survey, which I have no doubt is going to somehow say that New Prague's in the bottom 50% or something, and we're going to have to readjust everything. Because I've been part of 3 of them now, and that's happened almost every time. But I guess, my question is that why aren't we using the general step increases as part of the overall COLA? Instead of 6%, maybe it's, we already have the 1.75, I believe is what the number is for.
2.75.
2.75 per step.
Yep.
So they're getting that on top of it, and we're trying to get to 4%. Wouldn't it be more prudent to add another 1.25? So I've done since our last meeting that we had, I asked around school teachers, and I have no way of verifying or looking it up. I tried looking it up online that night that we were having the discussion.
Yep.
But I checked with the teacher. It was 2% last year, 2% this year. Now that the levy didn't pass, they're worried if there's even going to be one next year.
Yep.
So that's just one segment, but it's a pretty big segment in New Prague, as far as an overall employer. So, you know, to Maggie's point, looking at the Star Tribune article today that I read, full-time Minneapolis City Council people gave themselves 2%. I had quoted things last year when we were given 3% out every year, and it wasn't uncommon for me to read in the newspaper that Ramsey County or St. Louis County or something, where another city was raising theirs, where we were given 3%, they were at 1.75 or 2.25. We've always been on the high end of that. And that included the years that prices were actually going down, and it was deflation, and we were still giving 2.5, 2.75, 3%. So, I mean, I guess, when is it that the employees start to realize that they have to take part of this too, like the private sector does? The only other way we can control expenses would be to eliminate positions, which I do not advocate for and do not want to. I would certainly look at a hiring freeze, though. I mean, they're tough decisions that not only this board needs to make, but boards in the private sector have to make all the time, because they can't raise prices because of not inflationary times, but they can't raise prices because of competition or foreign competition or something else. And I'm sure General Mills doesn't want to cut 10,000 jobs, but they just recently did across their country, across the world, you know, or with Cargill or one of them, who's one of the Minnesota big companies, cut 10,000 jobs. I'm sure they don't want to do that, but they have to make those tough decisions in order to balance a budget. And it's just year after year. And to be honest with you, I don't want to spend another $40,000 for a compensation study. You know, I think we set ours 2 years ago. We matched up. Our steps are right in line with other cities and whatnot. And I'm not going to get into a bidding war. I don't want to see anybody. I like everybody, and I'm friends with a lot of people that work for the city, and it's very uncomfortable for me to be in this situation, but I represent the taxpayers. And it's just, my feeling is the general overwhelming feel from the taxpayers is that we're constantly getting squeezed. I can't control what the state legislature does and the billions of dollars that they've spent in a surplus and overtax, and then still manage to raise our taxes on license plate fees and everything else. And I certainly can't do it at the county level, and I can't do it at the school level. But what I can, the part that I can control and that I can tell them is right here. And unfortunately, that's unfortunate for you guys arguing for wage increases and whatnot, but this is the only thing that I can affect. How I can affect the other ones is I vote. So, and I vote with my pocketbook, and a lot of other people do too. So, again, I don't know why that 6.6%.
Is that with the step in there?
That's total compensation.
Is that the cost of living plus the 2.75?
So if you go cost of living plus 2.75, that'd be 6.75%.
Okay.
Would be the total.
So 6 point, okay.
So I just know, and in talking to the private sector and some public school members, you can see where it's a lot higher than what the private sector is getting and what everybody else. I just don't understand why it's just constantly that it's always on the public side is just higher and higher and higher. And I think in this same paper that talked about Hennepin County, and their thing was gonna go up 6.6% or 6.8%.
Yeah, their levy is,
And most of it was gonna
oh,
go
and the property
to,
tax, I guess, 6.5.
and most of it was gonna go to wages and benefits. But, and it's, and whether it's the Met Council or not, that, well, that was Hennepin County, but
Yeah.
there has to be some control somewhere, and I don't see a lot of boards doing, some boards you do read about. There are communities out there that unfortunately have to make those tough decisions, and I think New Prague, considering the situation that we're in now, with having to lower it even, well, I wouldn't even say I wasn't happy with 5.1%. I would be looking even today, even if the paperwork that we had done was, and that we certified was correct, but I would have still been looking to lower that somehow. And not all on the backs of the employees. They should be given something. And I've often talked about just trying to be fair with the COLA. Let's have that lump sum, whatever it is, and let's divvy it up amongst all full-time employees. as a fairness thing, because that's really what it's for, is eggs and milk and whatever else, and I don't even want to talk about it anymore, because I've said it a million times, and people are tired of hearing about it, but. So where does, when does that come into play? From just a management standard? When does that come into play that, geez, you know what, maybe we can't ask for 4% this year? We're in a situation that we're trying to hold this levy down and whatever else. We saw what the will of the voters were when they turned down the school levy. I mean, that's a good gauge of the general feeling out there. And you can talk all you want. It's only $138 extra a year, whatever it turns out to be. But it's not only that 138, but it's 138 from the city, and it's 166 from the county, and then it was the state, it's another, so now you got $1,000 a year, or $800 a year, or whatever, on a $350,000 house, or whatever they were using for their benchmark. They always make it seem, my point is, I wanna control somewhere. And I guess I would feel better is unless with you coming up and just presenting a 4%, or you guys maybe talked about the budget and say, hey, let's give ourselves 4%. More approach, we would like 4%, but we want to do this, or this is, and you made your case, but I'm just telling you in the private sector too, you don't see just 6.6% increases across the board year after year. And that's where ours tend to go. And I look at it overall as just trying to control that a little bit. I want to reward them, they're getting the steps, so they're guaranteed raises already, and now we keep adding this COLA on. And the biggest problem I have is that when some people are getting, because of their salary, well, let's just use $100,000 salary, gets $4,000 raise, while the person making 50 is only getting 2. And then next year I have to pay another 4% or 3% on 104,000. So you can see where that differential starts spreading quite a bit. So I'd like to see that lower, that the bottom 2/3 of people start to come more in line.
Any other ideas?
So I guess, I think I should have taken notes because I've got about 20 different talking points of things that you hit on.
Yeah.
Well, we can start with that one right there that you finished with. You talked about the recommending a comp study. So I'll be honest, I am only recommending a comp study because we have continually, there's been continual discussion of how employees are compensated. Because I think part of the last comp study that was approved basically laid out how the pay structure works. And so basically that everyone's fit into grids, positions are appropriated apart based on percentage, and you step up by percentage, and then any adjustments would happen within that pay grid. If for some reason we were to, and I'm not saying not to, but if for some reason we were to divvy it out and give everybody the exact same COLA, as in like $1,000 or $2,000, it would throw that whole pay grid out the window. That was the last comp study, because now the positions are no longer appropriately spaced from each other. And that is why, if for some reason we're going to go to a different COLA system or adjustment system or pay system, I would recommend bringing somebody in that understands payroll matrices and pay systems when compared to Minnesota pay law far better than anybody currently on staff. So that's the only reason why I'm recommending the comp study, is if we want to look a different direction for how we're paying employees and adjusting salaries, I believe that is needed. Otherwise, by year one, we've basically tossed out our whole system that we're currently working on and are kind of flying in the dark at that point. So if we want, that's, if we don't want to change up the current system, we can throw that $40,000 out. If we want to change up the system, I'd recommend we look at seriously changing up the system holistically and making sure that we're all on the same page with it.
Well, does the comp study, does that bring into, the competitiveness of this community here? It's gotta be here.
Yeah,
You
so
know?
the way the comp study is done is that they would come in here and say, okay, based off of your geography and population, we think that your comparables are this, this, and this. What is your guys' take on that? And then the city council would have the ability to say, yeah, say, maybe we consider Jordan to be somebody that we definitely want to benchmark ourselves against, but you know what? And for whatever reason, maybe Belle Plaine isn't, since they're both there. So we want to be compared to Jordan, not to Belle Plaine, or we want to be compared to Prior Lake, but not Savage, or city council would certainly get that choice. They would kind of, very similar to how MSA is working with the city on the comp plan, like they would then work with city council to figure out, okay, what type of competitiveness do you want to be? Like, do you want to be hitting right at average? Do you want to hit above average, below average? Where do you want on that? What type of pay system do you want? Do you want a similar system to how we've been doing with the COLA system? Maybe you want more of a pay for performance type system. It would basically allow us to fully, if you wanted to, reset the whole pay system across city top to bottom with a say in it of who you're being compared to, who you're not being compared to, that sort of thing.
Any other questions on that?
Well, I'll just make a comment. I totally support surveys and comp surveys, and I've had years and years of, that's how we're doing it that way. And in my world, we did annual surveys of the city of New Prague, and then we had banking association surveys that we could have pretty detailed information on each position in the Twin City market, outstate, and then size of facility and that type of thing. And I had thought that League of Minnesota Cities has something like that, but we don't, I think, it's not widely seen anyway. If we have access to it or not, I don't know.
Yep. So,
and
yeah.
I don't know what kind of detail they provide.
So unless it's changed, and I think I haven't looked at it for a couple of years. Maybe Robin has back since she's now handling all that stuff, and I'm not. At least 3 years ago, basically what they provide is the city would submit, say, we have 3 accounting techs, and this is the range of their salaries, and this is where the average. So this is the range of what they could make, and this is where the average of ours lands. And so that would be the data that we would have. We would know that if we look up accounting techs, we could then narrow down into by which cities we want to look at, which region of Minnesota, which population they may have, and then kind of the average salary data for those positions across.
And does it give benefits, survey information?
As far as I'm aware, it's only salary, not the added benefits on the other side.
Well, anyway, I'm totally supportive of it. I'm not supportive of doing it next year. I think that when we did it last time, my understanding was a 5-year rotation is what we're shooting for.
Okay.
And that puts us in a better spot, I think. 2025 is going to hopefully see inflation lower. We have so many institutions trying to catch up on the wage area. And obviously the Federal Reserve is trying to reduce wage cost across the board. So I think at least 2024 might find a little more stability. And if we had 2025 just is a better year to me. And plus we're not rushing into something. And I feel that this recommendation is a reaction to a short-term conversation that we had last time that you brought up. So I think it's more knee-jerk type of thing. And I think this should be a thoughtful thing, and we should try to get good estimates from different parties. You mentioned in your write-up about working with the city council. This is not how I remember it happened last time. And it was my first time through, so that's why I kind of remember kind of being surprised by it. But the city council, in my understanding, didn't pick the communities we did with. I think they chose.
Oh, they chose them?
No, they could have. It could have been done with city leadership, but in that case, city leadership was staff. And I don't know who, if it was just Mike or Patty or who was all involved in it, but we didn't see a lot of that information until the report was actually produced.
Right. Yep.
And I think to me, that was a failure of that survey, is that we should have been educated about the process, and then if we're gonna look at markets and things, we should at least know how that's gonna be looked at and how they're gonna be picked, just like you said, but that's not my remembrance of it. And actually, it was a frustration to me because I had to get over the gymnastics of not understanding of how they pick the markets, because we're all comparing with different cities, but then there's cases where the cities couldn't provide the comparison, so we had to go to something else. So the the auditor or the company had their own mechanics of how to doing that, and we didn't really understand that until afterwards. And I'm not saying anything was not legitimate, it's just understanding how that all worked. So I would expect or want that to go a little differently the next time around we do it. And if we want to do something more comprehensive, it's probably a good idea to do that, but I would support something in 2025 and try to get past this issue that we're trying to deal with the levy and not try to complicate things by spending more money at this time. So to me, I would support something further on. And getting at where we're at today with the salaries, like I said before, I appreciate the additional information that you provided with full-time equivalents and some of the information on increase in salaries, compensation. I think it's good for us to look at that history as one of the things we look at. Cost of living indexes are one of the things we look at, not to say we're going to follow. I don't suggest that we follow exactly cost of living indexes, but that's something we should be looking at. But I think all this stuff should be looked at together to try to come with a discussion recommendation. I would hope that discussion would take place earlier, September, October, like we talked about, and sometimes it has since I've been on the council. But otherwise, to me, it's more helpful doing it that way. Then we're not running into you presenting some number and then we're reacting to it instead of trying to have some of those conversations start in the beginning of it. Because we have had numbers that were different, and I know that we have influenced things and agreed upon earlier in the game than we have now. Where we're at today, I'm supportive of the numbers that you have and where you're at. The 4% is higher than what current inflation rate is, but I'm mindful of, the 8% inflation that we had earlier in the year and everything else that we're trying to compensate for it. And I think what you're discussing, to me, you have to manage the whole picture, and that's why I like talking about salary compensation expense as the total. When you're talking about the 6.6%, we have to manage that number. To me, as the city council, we're trying to manage the cost and effectiveness of city government for our residents, and we do that by the property tax that we charge or the levy that we approve. And our management is looking at the total number, in my mind, more so. And I've expressed many times just the frustration of dealing with being a state subdivision. We have to follow state rules as far as salaries and things like that, so that there's an automatic additional cost for wages and compensation just by being a city subdivision. It's structurally there because we have to follow city statutes and comp plans and things like that that we have to follow, that we don't have to necessarily in the private sector. So, but I'm comfortable with the 4%. We have to manage it through delay in hiring or not hiring or laying off, and that's, we have limited tools, so it's an important thing that we go over. But to me, I'm comfortable where we're at, I guess.
And I'll throw my 2 cents in as well that, just in trying to retain good employees and especially in utilities and public works and those employees, perhaps going elsewhere because pay is higher, I am comfortable for this year with a 4% COLA. Comfortable with the numbers. Otherwise, agree with Bruce and Sean about the comp study. I just don't think it's necessary in 2024.
And that's fine. Like I said, really the comp study recommendation came off of me not feeling comfortable with if we do something different with COLA other than a percentage, that it kind of blows up the whole current pay system. And in my mind would leave us in the dark going forward until something is put into place with people that understand pay systems better than I do.
I disagree. I think you're making it way too complicated. It was just another tool. I don't know what the right number was, but I don't see where fairly distributing the cost of living would throw things drastically out of whack. And I don't even see how it's that time consuming to say our 4% is, you know, $28,000 or $52,000 or whatever it was. Where was it? What was that number? I think I saw it in here. Wasn't it each
Oh, yeah.
each deduction was $26,000 or something, or,
Each percentage is $32,000.
right? So even if we equally divvied up, let's just say it was 1%, and we divvied it up the 32,000 amongst all 50 employees, everybody got the same cost of living, not including steps. Not including the fact that we just did a wage compensation a year and a half ago that put us, if I remember right, above a lot of similar sized cities. So, not including the situation that Bruce is in with linemen in a particular segment that seems to be, or police officers, and Tim's not here tonight, that right now currently in the marketplace seem to be kind of its own subset and a whole different animal, just because of the skill set that's involved, particularly with those two professions.
But with the 4%, aren't we spreading that equally?
I mean, with this, everybody gets it's spread by percentage. So
Oh, percentage.
4% means that everyone gets 4%.
I got you.
You know, when you guys are
Fortunately,
talking
that
about this,
4%.
I got you.
Okay.
how do we stop that,
No.
the linemen from packing up their tools and leaving the next city, if, you know, they got a bigger or better wage benefit?
That would have to be addressed on again, that subset that we would have to look, that might, instead of lumping everybody in.
Well, I don't think that that's equitable when you take a sector of employees and treat them differently.
Well, we've already just decided to do that with police officers, and now we want to do it with, and linemen we've done recently. So I don't
But
understand that.
I'm talking specifically about COLA.
Yeah.
That is equitable, though, if you take the lump sum and divvy it up equally amongst all city employees. That is the most equitable thing that there is, compared to somebody getting 4% equals $5,200 and somebody gets 4% equals $1,500.
It's just not how the world works, though. I mean, there's no
No,
business that divvies up their thing equally. Because the higher paid people, like you said, you're gonna shrink everybody together. Everyone gets paid the same eventually.
Yeah, but just as a way now, as you can see, that upper third is growing at a much steeper rate than the bottom 2/3.
The rate is the same.
The rate is the same, but the dollars, the real dollars, and I'm just saying that's a new way of looking at it. I don't think I'm the first one. I can't believe that's ever thought of this being an equitable situation.
Well, in
The city
social
of New Prague can, you know, and matter of fact, people that I've bounced it off of thought absolutely.
I see that in bonus structures or profit sharing
I
structures
don't-
or that type of thing, but I've never
Let's
seen
not call it
in-
COLA then. Let's call it bonuses. Let's call it just general wage increase, or let's call it, we don't have to call it cost of living adjustment. I mean, where that term came from was other state unions that negotiate and put that language in there.
Because the only time, like when I got a pay raise at the county, that really amounted to anything is when they switched the lanes that you were in. COLA didn't mean nothing. Yeah, you got a little
Right,
stipend.
and in
But you had to actually switch the people into a higher step after a certain time to get them to close that gap.
and at least in my career, I never have had my wage or the discussion, my year-end review and with the increase called a COLA. It was just, okay, so we're gonna increase your salary
2%.
1.3%, or some years it might be higher, or whatever, based on performance, based on the market, and based on, you know, the overall health of the company, you know,
I
et
think
cetera.
COLA is much more in the public sector used more.
Right.
And I think we're starting to think of it as tied to the index. I think that's the problem with using that word. It doesn't have to match the index. It can just be a cost of living adjustment that's different than that.
And,
It's just whatever you choose that to be is what it is.
right, and that's what,
1% or 5%, and that is your cost of what we believe we're giving it to you for. But it's that, to me, that's more of a public sector term.
I agree totally to that, and that's why I said, it almost makes sense to just say, everybody gets the equal share of, you know, the city can afford a 3% COLA, and that equates to X, and then everybody divvy it up amongst the full-time employees, because the people that get $5,200 raises compared to $1,500 COLA increases still pay the same for the goods and services, which this is supposed to address. That's why I think it is extremely equitable.
Yeah, you're
And it's out of, you're right, it's.
I mean, you're really going deep, but yeah, there is truth to that. Once you get to a certain level, that, I mean, that's an economic reality.
And you know, as, if somebody gave me a COLA of, well, whatever, and then this new kid that just started, hey, look, I've been doing this 30 years. I don't want this kid next to me making the same COLA that I am. That's why I stayed with you.
Yeah, but you're making them a lot different, because first of all, you've had the experience, you're on a way higher step than that new guy walking in. A COLA is for living adjustments to combat inflation or combat rising costs, inflation, essentially. And that kid standing next to you, whether he started yesterday and you've been here for 20 years, is paying the same for the exact things that this is meant to cover. It costs him the same to heat his home. It costs him the same gallon of gas that he goes to Coburn's to fill up on as he does you, the 20-year guy.
I do think overall, though, we're trying to be competitive and we're trying to avoid what happened other times, which seems to happen often, where we have to have these major adjustments whenever we do a survey. And COLA helps do that we try to stay in lane with other ones we're matching ourselves against. And if you divide it in a different way, we're not going to stay competitive. We are going to see some big changes for the higher paid people whenever we do a survey, big changes. But, and
Eventually, yeah, but maybe we would be the trendsetters that other communities
but
would look
you're gonna
at
see-
around us and say, geez, that does seem like a good.
you're going to see those people leave. I mean, normally wages are not the first reason people leave, but you will in that case because they won't be keeping up.
Well, I like the 4% and Bruce's idea also with doing the study in 25. Because of,
In 25, or stay on the 5-year cycle? 'Cause when was the
well, that
last one?
would be the 5-year cycle. That would be,
The
2021?
5-year cycle would basically have
About
us start it
25.
in 25 and wrap up.
Implement in
either
26.
late-
Yes.
or implement 26.
yes,
Yeah, I was suggesting that we have it,
because
that people would have their 2024 wage information available in the survey.
yep,
So it would have
Yeah,
to
for
be
the-
mid-25.
so it would be there for the following year.
Right.
And then I have a question too. Do we have to wait till the tail end? Well, and I don't mean the tail end, cause I know you guys got it in October, but do we have to wait to start negotiating contracts with the benefits? Like with health insurance and stuff like that?
So generally, health insurance, the first numbers seem to roll out towards the end of August, early September. I know dental, we didn't get it until the end of September, quite frankly. And so, because we have discussed that with our insurance reps, and they're, and maybe Maggie can speak to it, but generally, insurance stuff, we can't start negotiating in February, basically, for the next year, because I think they want data from how the year's gone, and I know they use that our claims from up to that point, they're using our claims to try to judge our premiums going forward. And so, at least what we have heard is that you kind of have to wait until mid to late August before some of that stuff starts rolling back. I know they mentioned that they can certainly be in contact with these various groups of what we are thinking, but that we may not hear numbers back from them.
And I think that might vary by organization, because in my space, there is a call letter that comes out in April. The call letter is about regulations, insurance regulations. Companies then haven't,
For that new.
for the next coming year, and then companies have an opportunity to respond to that call letter, and then finally, the regulations are finalized by the, in this case, CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and other departments of insurance. So that whole process means that the final call letter is usually issued in late May, early June, and then from there, companies can start figuring out what their rates are going to be. In my organization, we are often able to provide our customers with renewal rates by the end of June, generally at the earliest. So, but I can't speak for anybody
No,
else.
I understand, but I guess I'd like to get that process started.
Started sooner,
or
absolutely.
Get the information as soon as possible, you know, instead of kind of waiting
Yeah,
until.
August
the norm.
seems, yeah, it seems late to me, that, because so many organizations need to go into budget session, and so that,
Yep.
if that can get pushed in any way, and open that
And that
discussion.
may be a Sourcewell thing too. I think I mentioned it in here, and I know I mentioned it 2 council meetings ago, that
Yep.
scale organizations there in Scott County have started talking about potentially pooling together in more of a self-insured model across the whole
Oh,
county.
really?
And so, Scale is currently having a study completed for all cities and townships as to, does it make sense for this city with their current system to potentially pool? Would they have a savings? Maybe they wouldn't. And so, hopefully,
Is the county on that too, Josh?
yes, I mean,
So it'd be the county?
so it's kind of basing it off what the county the county
Yeah,
has
the
a
county is
self-insured model.
self-insured, yes.
And they're kind of basing it off of that model, because it all started when Shakopee was trying to figure out, okay, how could we get costs under control? And they started looking into the county model. And the county said, hey, well, why don't we just join together? Like, that could potentially see savings across the board. And then it expanded into, this is kind of what Scale was about, of working together to find the efficiency. And so, hopefully, I think that's kind of the data gathering started on that here, but as that unfolds, I will certainly keep you guys in the loop, so we can say, hey, is this something that we want to potentially get on board with to help control costs?
Yeah, and that's not uncommon. We work with coalitions all the time.
It's good.
know,
That's good that they're addressing it. I guess I didn't read that part of your memo.
It was a long memo.
Yes, it was. But, okay.
So I guess at this point, where do we land with the COLA situation? Am I hearing a 4 votes to go 4%? Is that?
I'm good with 4%, and we'll do a comp study in 25.
Okay.
Me
So
also.
you're good with a 6.6% increase overall?
Yes.
All right, continuing, I guess, to walk through, this then.
Excuse me, 6.6 just seems a little high, but is that,
6% wages and benefits, so we're.
with benefits?
Yeah, that includes all benefits as well. So you're looking at health insurance and dental increases in there.
With just wages,
Steps.
what is it?
Steps, yeah.
Just wait, do you have that number off the top of your head? Just
Must be
wages?
5 something?
I would imagine it would be around there, because we have some employees who aren't getting steps.
And that's getting more and more. How many are now past the 11 years?
We gotta be up above 10, I believe, that are
So 20% of our people are not getting
a step increase.
step increases, so we're not, it's not 6% when you're talking about wage growth. And that's a
Wage
kind of
growth is
note.
six- Or no,
It's less than
wage
six.
and benefits, 6.6%.
The benefits, we have less control over than the wage. So I think it's important to monitor that wage part of it. can understand it's different.
Yeah, cause that's the number that I'd like to work off, it would be that number.
Well, benefits you can
some-
manipulate too by raising deductibles and
To some
everything else like
extent,
private sector does. If it's a 13% increase
In our
1 year and we,
contribution and that type of thing.
in our contribution, yes.
I guess I would hope to.
The employee takes on a little bit more percentage of the cost versus,
If this includes benefits, I'm surprised at 6.6.
It's just,
Because the cost of insurance has gone up.
yep.
Yeah,
well, that number was in here somewhere. What-
yeah, health insurance, 6.5% increase, dental insurance, 8.07% increase.
So that must mean that a portion of the employees aren't taking insurance through the city.
Yeah,
Their
so we-
spouses.
Yep, so we have some employees who are single only, we have some who are family.
Those are different
So-
rates.
Sometimes our own costs, you will see wrapped up in personnel is you may have 3 extra employees who made the jump to family, so that's gonna see our costs spike up quite a bit, but you're also gonna see employees who maybe their kids are not out of the house and it's just the 2 of them and it's cheaper for them both to take single. So I mean that health insurance does flux up and down depending on who's taking what and that sort of thing.
Is our health insurance self-insured?
Oh,
Or is it
Oh,
fully?
that
fully
is?
insured?
The
we're
pool is self-insured.
It is.
All that being said though, I'm still okay with the 4% and then in 2025 do a comp study.
Bruce, wage scale is up 4.99%
Okay.
over 2023.
Okay, let's keep rolling.
Okay, we'd mentioned health insurance. Like Maggie said, we are seeing a rise of 6.5% over last year. As a reminder, that does come after a drop of 11% last year, so we are still lower than 2021. And I'd mentioned the scale. I was looking into a countywide pool.
I would hope that
Dental
would go.
insurance, we are up a little over 8%, with an total increase to the general fund of a little over $3,600. And we have already directed Gallagher to make sure we go out for bid on that to see what other dental insurances are. I think we've had Bennett Delta for quite a while now, so take a look at that. And life and short-term disability, we are currently in the first year of a 3-year agreement rolling into the second year, so, and there's no rate changes on that through 25. Real quick through operations and capital, I mentioned it because it's left it on the sheet because it had been on there. I'd originally recommended putting $5,000 to the side for new laptops for council, but you guys had asked to have that taken off. There is a property and liability going up 7% for 2024. Fire, there is a change that happened. I know the chief asked that we add $2,000 to motor fuels for next year that he had not originally put in his budget, so that did add $2,000. Going back to our deficit number, that did take us up to a $95,000 deficit from a $93,000 deficit. And then the aquatic center is projecting a loss in 2024 of a little over $231,000. So our half would be just about $116,000, which is another $14,000 decrease over 2023. They are working on potentially new price structures, I know, and maybe Dwayne or Rick can speak more to this over there, but
They are.
they've kind of revamped management over there, and I think they are seeing better results in terms of efficiencies and staffing. So hopefully that'll all help.
That's quite a bit lower than what it was last year, and it wasn't last year, it was like 150,000 per?
That was 2 years ago. If you remember, when my first year was, I think 152 is what we ended up paying out. As I said, this year we're looking at paying out close to 130,000, and so next year they're projecting a drop to have us paying out 115. So we are at least moving in a positive direction in terms of that organization. And just of a note, we do currently have $40,000 set aside within the general fund as a contingency for some reason if we don't hit projected numbers. That is just assigned, and so we are fully able to utilize that money for something else. It is just currently flagged as contingency at this point.
I had a question on that, because
Yeah.
I had thought that when I first came on board, that was kind of thought about as being for equipment replacements. And we had bought, in this, I wasn't involved in the fitness center, but the city purchased equipment as part of the program.
Correct, so.
It was 100% the city, I think.
Yep,
was
yeah,
it?
so within the whole thing, the city, within the agreement provides various equipment for pool use, I think the Whibbit that's currently there.
All the
or-
recreational type equipment in there, the whibbits,
And
the
then, did we
basketball hoops and
sell something last year too, or the year before?
we did.
climbing
Matt
thing.
made a mint on those.
Made $1,000 or
Isn't that
something?
that climbing thing or something?
But, so I guess I question, if it was for that purpose, why
So-
haven't we already used it, like,
It-
10
it-
years
I mean,
ago?
If that money was set aside for that purpose, it's entirely possible. I know the notes that Robin and I have access to basically say aquatic center contingency.
Well, you
and
guys
so-
know
And,
more
and
than
so I guess
what
that,
was
yeah,
for,
but you guys would be working with older information than Robin or I have access to.
That's what Patty always used to tell me, that because I questioned it right when I joined the joint power, what happens if we go over, and she said that they had this $50,000 that you're talking about that would cover that, so, I mean, that's just my knowledge of it, when Patty was telling me too.
Go over what?
If what the school's projecting, and if they lose more than that, and
Oh.
and we have to cover more than what we're projecting, that 50,000 is there to cover that difference.
I believe
Oh, it's
that
not
to
to
be,
cover a loss, okay.
I believe that to be the case, yes.
It's not to cover a loss, then it's just to cover if the projection is off.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The contingency fund.
Okay, thank you.
And then rolling into special projects, I do still recommend setting $100,000 aside. When Wold was looking through our building, and I did put in attachment 9, their slides, and I have since reached out, and they're putting together the actual maintenance report for us. That if we were to stay in this building, we would need things such as a new roof tuck pointing the exterior, replacing the HVAC, replacing all the windows, replacing carpeting, just to name some of them. And obviously, if we move out of this building, that's not money we'd want to put back into it. But knowing that those expenses are coming, whether they are in the form of maintenance of this building or a new building, just to start setting some money aside to do that once we figure out what we want to do, and start planning for that. For fire, we are looking at using public safety funding to start replacing radios. I mentioned in the memo, we kind of skipped over it through our wages talk, but we did end up receiving $359,753 in public safety funding. I believe it is supposed to be delivered to us by the day after Christmas, or it was like Merry Christmas present. But it's not available for use until we actually receive it. And so I know it's been mentioned briefly. I think the plan is early January to come back with okay, these are our plans for how to spend down these funds. These are how we're able to spend them. But in the short term, while we're putting the budget together, I am recommend using some of those funds to cover our short-term, I'll say shortfall in SRO spending, since we're picking up a little bit more of the bill than we will in normal years. And then as well as starting to replace radios for fire, because it is funding that is available for both. For police, we are recommending at replacing another squad car. We were finally able to replace, I believe, 4 of them this year after having 4 off years through COVID.
And it worked, right? I mean, we didn't really need those 4, we were missing 4. And
Well-
the police still made all their calls and,
They still made all their calls. You kind of hope not to get them all piled on to 1 year,
1 year.
because then you're spending $240,000 instead of $62,000. And so plus as much as they run, there's a wear and tear on them that most cars aren't receiving. And so
but we're turning them in at 60 and 70,000 miles.
it's 60 and 70,000 miles of not being shut off, basically.
I know, but
Cops are notorious about wrecking their cars, so.
How large is the fleet?
I believe our fleet,
8?
I was gonna say 8.
So we have half of them that are brand new?
I believe so
Close to
now,
new.
yes.
So then how do we reconfigure that so we don't have 4 of them coming due in a year?
Yeah, so I think that is gonna be similar to, I talk about the IT laptop planning, is trying to plan that out of,
But we almost have to talk about how they get used, that some get more miles on than others, to
Yep.
stagger them somehow, so
and,
that is a risk.
yeah, I mean, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something.
well, it's not like they completely break down. I mean, let's be honest. If we ran them to 100,000 or if budget, we needed to reevaluate it on any particular year. This year, considering half of them are brand new, I'd like to take that 60,000 out of this, but, you know, I'd rather put, you know, $15,000 in for wear and tear or something that in case a transmission went out or something. It just seems that it's always to run with a miles and whether or not they're running all the time is, I'm sure they are in the winter, but
I partially agree with you, but, boy, it gets expensive. You gotta start, you know, that's why they have them insurances now. Cause your insurance is running out.
It's not just the mileage. I was actually talking to a truck driver about that, and he said, you know, whenever you're just idling, it is wear and tear on the engine. You know, granted, the miles are low, but Bruce, you bring up a really good point about we have 4 new vehicles in 1 year, and how do you prevent that happening when they all reach their mileage limit in the eyes of our officers?
So because we had that buildup, the one that was scheduled to go offline this year, does it have more miles than we would normally have on it?
I believe so. So I don't know the mileages offhand. That's usually all the stuff that Tim has kept track of. I know, I believe we kind of had basically a 7-year rotation, I think is the number. So basically, we would replace one car every 7 years. Is kind of what the previous rotation had been. And I know.
Yeah, I just don't know how that was managed, so I don't know if the 4 that we got rid of, we put way more miles on and
So-
we saved
Did we get
miles
rid of
on the last 4, or?
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure how those got managed
They,
here towards
they
the
do
end.
go back into the
they're
fleet.
not good enough for the police officers, but they're good enough for the building inspectors and everybody else, cause we rotate them through. So they just don't go away.
No,
So the cars certainly don't go away. I
And we
will
still
say
run
that-
more miles
I
on
will
them.
say that the vehicles that our planning department uses or our parks department uses, like, you can tell they're hurting. Our planning department recently inherited the old 2005, 2009 Ford Fusion from the police department, and you can hear that thing coming from 2 miles away, type of thing. And I believe Matt's guys put quite a bit of work into it, and we're probably not gonna be driving that thing to St. Cloud anytime soon, type of situation. So,
And that's just used in town.
and yeah, that's basically just used in town, or if
So
they've
if it
got
did break
another
down, yeah.
county function to run to.
We could walk back.
You could walk back or
Don't
have,
say that
have one of
because
the other
you'll end
trucks
up walking
run it
back from
around, pick you up.
Shakopee.
What, so I'm curious, if we got rid of 4 last year, why do we still have the Fusion? Where did the 4 go?
Well, one was for the junkyard.
Yep, so I mean, I believe some of them, we had one that had real transmission, like, we kind of cycled throughout. We had an old police cruiser that had real transmission problems that we cycled out, and so that kind of rotated another police cruiser in there. I think if we were able to get a decent trade-in on them, I don't know off the top of my head how exactly we trail out. That's certainly information I can get to you guys of where exactly the destination of all 4 of those cars ended up, but I do know that.
Josh, I sold 2 of them on min bid for the police department, and then
Oh, yes,
of
I
them
do
went-
see one of them driving around our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
that is correct.
Yeah.
They normally don't get traded in though, do they?
I would say 50% of the time, depends on what we have out there. A lot of the times they're getting swapped out for old squad cars. So if they're getting rid of one, we might replace Ken's. So, because they're mainly, they're not being driven as much as a police car would be. If they break down, we can try to fix them instead of the cops actually needing them kind of on the spot. So I think the Parks has 2 of them. Ken's got 1, and I have an 05 at the waste treatment plant. That's not even a squad car, it's a Crown Vic, it's that old.
Oh, it's that old squad.
Yep.
What's
And
that
that one
used
cannot leave town either.
Huh?
They're instructed that one will not leave town either. We don't trust it.
And I mean, I know the wastewater, to answer your question, uses them to go out and check lift pumps and that sort of thing. I think the Parks Department has used them before, and some of those old Crown Vics that you give it to the high school kid and they can throw their weed whackers in the back type of thing. So to keep working down that list, building inspector, I do have $10,000 in there. Basically in 2020, the city kind of did an update of the finance department offices, reconfiguring the space, painting, replacing carpet. At that time, there was no work done on the community development side. This was primarily due to space constraints with the employee configuration down there. It didn't make sense that you probably, without getting extra customized office furniture, could have actually made that work with the employees. Since we remodeled up here and were able to move 2 employees out, there is more space. And so work was last done down there, speaking with Ken, as far as he could recollect, almost 20 years ago now, when the rooms were painted and carpet was replaced, but all of the furniture certainly predates anybody in that office, so we aren't entirely sure how old it is. I guess with that, I am recommending putting $10,000 into the budget to update desks and chairs and other furniture for the staff in that office. Certainly not a full refresh of the space, but I don't want to do a full refresh without us knowing what we're doing with the space. So, looking at the streets, parks, and golf, we've kind of talked about that already. The 3 of those departments putting a
Excuse
stump
me.
grinder to help us kind of transition the ash trees out of New Prague into the many other species we're currently planting. And then Park Board, of note, is getting an allocation of $130,000 moved from 2023 to 2024. Last year, we looked to apply for a couple grants to expand sidewalks on Lexington Avenue and on 12th Avenue Southeast. We were not successful in the grant process, though did receive good information on how to be more competitive in 2024. So we'd be looking to move that forward to 24 to hopefully secure the funding to get those 2 segments completed.
Yeah, we're reapplying again, yep.
That's around where?
Sidewalk on the, well,
By Settlers Park?
Settlers Park, and then another one through the industrial park. And then there's a little segment that actually will be part of the 2024 CIP, kind of along Lexington Avenue.
Professional services, IT, I do have $42,000 into the IT budget for equipment. I've been working with Ken and I have been working with CTS to put together a 5-year equipment replacement plan. And while it's certainly not perfect, and we have more conversations around servers, they are pretty gung-ho about replacing servers for us at a high cost. Attachment 10 does kind of lay out where the plan currently sits. The important part to look at right now is that in 2020, we replaced all of our computer equipment across the city with CARES dollars and trying to get us into a cycle of equipment replacement that doesn't have all computers across the city coming due in 1 year. So we will likely be replacing the stuff in 24. We'll probably be replacing a year early than we normally would have. We would retain all of that equipment because as we get to the back year of that plan, we'll be holding on to equipment for 1, if not 2 years longer than would traditionally be recommended. So we'd acquire basically backups with ourselves to hopefully get us through. Looking at the planning, I'm recommending putting $40,000 aside to continue, I guess, the update of our planning and development regulations and plans. We'll be wrapping up our comp plan here, hopefully in the Q1 2024. And the next step would be to look at doing a full update of the zoning ordinance. These documents traditionally work hand in hand, one guiding the larger picture and one a more specific what's happening on each development. And so our zoning ordinance hasn't really been updated as a whole since it was originally adopted in the 70s. And while piecemeal stuff has certainly gotten us through, at times it is difficult to read and find what regulations you're looking for or what in what section, and difficult for staff. It's much more difficult for developers or citizens who are trying to get work done. For the city, it doesn't always necessarily address site development in the way that we would wish, and it may also be missing pieces that we're not even really aware of. So once the comp plan is done, we can kind of take, okay, these are what we have learned through our engagement with both council and the citizens, kind of is how we want to see the city develop, and we can look at then updating the zoning ordinance to have our development then and regulations reflect that. We talked to MSA just to get a, hey, what would this sort of thing cost? And they recommended about $80,000. And so I guess I'm recommending budgeting $40,000 this year, and then the remaining next year or for 2025 to have the rewrite take place at that point. Police, you will see an increase in leased equipment. This comes primarily from the body camera. So back in, I believe it was 2019 is when we picked up our body cameras. We paid for those in full at the time. This year, we saw almost 50% increase in the cost of those body cameras, and
Imagine that. A private company, knowing that we have to have them, and then bilks us, the cities and the municipalities.
Everybody.
we're not the only ones, obviously.
Is there any competition out there besides Axion or whatever?
Yep, so,
Is it probably just one other?
yes. So Tim certainly looked around. As soon as that number came in, he kind of said, okay, we'll talk to you later. And, started calling around. He said there's primarily one other company that does it.
Yeah.
But we'd basically have to revamp software and all this other stuff because Axion.
So they got us.
At this point, they've got it all, at this point. You're gonna have to hope that at some point the private sector says, hey, there's certainly an opportunity here, because I know, just speaking with other administrators, every single one of them is complaining about the cost of Axion at this point. To pay for it all up front, obviously, you can do the math, the 32 times 5, you get about $160,000. They did say we could, instead of paying for it all up front like we did last time, we can pay for it over 5 years without any sort of interest rate tacked on, that sort of thing. And so I would certainly recommend, if we continue down that route, to pay for it over 5 years to help level out the budget fluctuations.
So this was a one-time 50% increase, or?
Well, so basically, the contract is now $160,000, which is a 50% increase over the last one.
And that would cover the 5 years?
Yes. Well, yeah. So then we split that 160 over 5 years to be $32,000 a year.
Okay, I just want to make sure that wasn't.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's not 5% every single year.
Well, no, just next year's is
But there's more cameras
18%,
too,
and then there's,
right?
yeah.
Correct. Yeah. I mean,
There's more
we have a
cameras,
few
too.
more cameras with additional officers.
We have more car and more officers.
Correct. Yeah. And this basically is tasers and body cams, I believe, are included in this update.
Is that also the equipment, the files that are created that then can be, the files are
Storage.
uploaded and, and then
Yeah, so
reviewed? So it's
yeah.
everything, it's not
Yeah.
just the camera? and just
It's not just the cameras. That's kind of like the main thing that people see, but it's your tasers, it's your cameras, they have file storage and all that other stuff for all of that.
Does city staff get free tasers then too?
I don't know, but I heard that they used to allow you to be tasered if you're interested.
They still do.
That's all right.
It's one of those things where
That would fix my heart problem.
I'm just curious enough that it may end up happening one of these days.
Just let me know the day, because I'd like,
I'd rather not have you there.
I would like to pull the trigger.
I like to roast marshmallows.
And not just once, maybe.
Oh, God, well, geez, it won't shut off.
All right, Matt, will you be there to make sure
That
it
crappie
shuts
flap, that's an extra.
I tell you what, let's think about it at budget time next year when you're putting it
Yeah,
together.
there you go. So, yeah, the other one is the comp study, and if that's not something we wanna do, certainly take that out.
Yep.
Or push that back.
Yeah, push it back, I'm not going.
Debt service, I just mentioned that, we are increasing debt service. The payments are going up about $40,000 this year, primarily due to the addition of the 2023 bond. That kind of general, payment schedule can be seen in attachment 11. Or the levy schedule for that is in attachment 11, not the payment schedule. For other notables, this year is an election year, so that's going up as we have 3 elections we have to cover, and this, due to the county, we now have to cover early voting for the Scott County side for 45 days prior to the election.
Is that just Scott County and not LeSueur County?
Correct. So if you're on, if, you're Sean or I in LeSueur County and we want to early vote, we need to go down to the
Oh,
LeSueur
down
County
to
Courthouse.
To the center,
Yes,
okay.
in Scott County, if you are in the New Prague area, I believe it is, or is it just New Prague proper?
Should be just New Prague proper.
Okay, yeah, if you're in New Prague proper on the Scott County side, then you would come to City Hall.
How much is that gonna be about? Do you know?
$9,000.
Well,
Oh, it was $9,000? I couldn't find that.
yeah, that's our,
That's our,
Proposed.
yeah, so that's our, basically our estimate of, this is what it's gonna cost us to have to pay an
For 3
election
of them
judge
this
for
year.
3 election cycles.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, I mean, that's just little old New Prague. That's- I think it's worth the letter going to all our reps.
and that's us
And,
trying to staff as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
We had early voting for the last voting cycle. So I don't know how much traction. A lot of people were like, this is great, this is great. And then you'd get like 6 people at a time, cause they're like, yeah, my friend just told me at the grocery store, I got my friends and we came down. So we'll see how busy it is. If we're actually gonna have to pull in,
Extra judges,
extra judges to help, so.
so.
Cause you need at least 2 people with every voter, so.
And so it is certainly something I know that we kind of briefly discussed it. I talked with both Jordan and Elko. Is there something we want to do about potentially teaming up on this so that we, if we're staffing it or paying for it, maybe the 3 of us are paying for one location? Because really it's just the county doesn't want to handle it anymore. There's nothing that says it has to happen or where it has to happen. So I think that is certainly a conversation that if you guys would like, I'll keep having with them to say, hey, is there something we can do here so we aren't 3 different cities paying for something when maybe we can go together and all share the cost of it.
Yeah, I liked
Great
it when
idea.
it was at the
County.
the county
Highway
truck place, highway department
Yep.
location. I thought that was okay for Prague people to go to.
For early voting anyway.
Yeah.
I didn't, but
Yeah, I think it came down to the county just didn't want to pay for it
Yeah.
at early voting anymore.
because they employed 2 full-time, so.
And of note, we may try to budget each year, just so to, I mean, it's not a large fluctuation, but again, just to kind of level out those fluctuations for elections year to year as we learn what's going on there. So then getting into kind of my last big change, at end of 2023 at this point, I'm conservatively estimating that the golf club will have a fund balance of $620,000. And so with that, while we are initially planning on reducing the transfer by 20% this year down to 97,000, I guess I would propose suspending the transfer for 2024. I think with their fund balance, they should be able to get by just fine for at least a year, and we are ultimately responsible anyway. And so if it all goes bad after these last 3 good years, the city will be the one that is on the hook to make it right over there anyway. So as the final thing to make up the revenue deficit would be to suspend the $97,016 for 2024, to then look at it again next year. I guess that would actually leave us with a $1,946 surplus that we could either work back into our contingency that we have every year of $25,000, or we could look at, I guess, reducing that $1,946.
And now it will be 41,900 with the.
Oh, yeah, so yeah, I mean, with that,
Oh, yeah.
oh, yep, space that one out. So yeah, that actually takes us to 41,000. So I guess if we want to, we could reduce that golf transfer to the $41,946. So it would be about half of what we were intending to transfer to the golf club.
Okay. Any questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to the,
So I guess I would like some sort of direction from you on on whether we are looking at going forward with this, and if we are, what you would like to do with the $41,000, or if we would like to see some changes, just so that I know what to bring back to you on Monday evening next week.
I got a quick question on that. So, page 8, the debt service. Could I don't know if I missed that or what, but there was a mistake in the bonding from Baker Tilly?
So Baker Tilly provides us with a worksheet every year to tell us how much to levy. Not necessarily what our payment is, like we've got our books with what our payments are gonna be for the next 15 years.
Right.
But they give us a worksheet that lays out, this is what you're expecting to collect for assessments, this is what you have collected for assessments already, based off of how it really is all based off of assessments. They don't ever, you don't anticipate people prepaying. And so when they don't prepay, they're paying an interest rate on that. So if you prepay, now you're losing out on that interest. And generally there was somebody over at Baker Tilly that sounds like they handled all of these worksheets and kind of debt levy schedules for every city that uses Baker Tilly. That person passed away here a little over about a year ago. A year and a half ago. While Robin was going through that worksheet this year, instead of us reaching out to Baker Tilly saying, because I don't know if they've got someone on staff yet who's really working on updating those. So Robin and I were working through them, and she actually found an error in the levy amount that we were supposed to levy for this year in the formula. And so ultimately, it would have been money that would have been gone towards debt service. When you levy for debt service, you can't spend it on something else. But it allowed us to drop our debt service levy. I would have to go see exactly what that number was, but it allowed us to drop our debt service levy because
27,857.
we would have basically over levied this year than what we needed to for debt service.
But then, okay, so I understand that, but
Yep.
then the new increase over 2023 is 40,442.
Correct.
So how does that increase equate if we actually?
Yeah. So I mean, if we'd kept that 27 in there, it would have been whatever 27 times 186 or 861 is, would have been what that formula would have spit out at us. The increase of 40,000 over last year is due to the 2023 bond coming on. If we hadn't had a 2023 bond, I think we actually would have gone down a little bit just by the way the levy schedules work out. But we are 27 less than what 27 grand less than what the formula spit out at us originally. Once we fixed the formula, it spit out a number 27,000 less, though due to the 2023 bond is still 40,000 higher than last year's levy amount.
Okay. Well, as a public school kid, I don't know, I don't figure that out.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, it's been a lot of years and I've killed a lot of brain cells. I don't, I'll take your word for it. There was a question that was brought up to me, and I didn't see it. In the golf budget, there was an increase of $30,000 for an assistant for Kurt. Did that go through?
That was certainly discussed, I believe, at our.
I could have missed that meeting. I made every budget meeting, but it might have been discussed during a regular council meeting. Because the management contract really should cover anything additional if he needs somebody else within his company. So I don't know why that city has to take that on, that expense. Because it didn't, initially when we set this up, my first year when I was on the council 13 years ago, there was a manager and then Kurt. We had two people that were able to handle it. Now all of a sudden we've run into this problem where the contract can't handle it, and then.
I mean, at this point, the golf board, looking at the day-to-day operations, are recommending that the needs of the golf course have grown to the point where it could use additional part-time staff, is what that $30,000 is for.
But that's in their budget.
That's in their
It'd be
budget.
in the
but I-
golf board budget, correct, which is approved by the city council.
Right, so we can question it here. I'm just kind of curious on that, and I just want to make sure that the council is aware of that increase too, because that overall contract's gone up dramatically over the last 7 years or whatever, to the point where it almost made sense of bringing somebody on
As a city employee.
as a department head, which I really don't want to do because the whole idea of having somebody manage the club was to keep costs down, and I'm worried about that starting to escalate up. So I didn't see it in here, and I must have missed that.
So-
I did miss a council meeting in September, or whatever.
Yep, so it's not really, most of the discussion seemed to have centered around the general fund, which is why that's kind of what this packet entails here. I know we kind of, I believe is at the November 18th meeting. Can't remember who was here and who wasn't here for that one. Was when we kind of went over all those enterprise fund budgets and that sort of thing. And
I think maybe you were traveling and you
I might have been.
just landed or,
Oh, that was the meeting, yeah, okay.
yep.
Okay. I just had to find my notes here, because I had.
The contract wasn't approved because you weren't here and.
Correct, yeah, so yeah, we
I
didn't,
wasn't here either.
correct, yeah, we didn't approve the final golf manager contract. We decided to wait, because one, I'd just been able to give it to you guys, to look at, and two, we did want to have everybody here, to be able to comment on it.
Well, at least you, because you were on the board, the golf board.
Yeah, and yeah, and that's during budget time. And we had multiple planning commission things, so I was at like 4 meetings a week, so golf board was an easy meeting for me to, knowing that it comes back through here anyways. So, yeah, so I missed some of those golf board meetings, and I'll fully be responsible. I couldn't keep doing 4 meetings a week with budget meetings and then planning and let alone council and whatever else. So if anybody wants to take over that golf board for me, they certainly can. Matter of fact, I don't know how I got stuck with it
You want
a few
the
years
aquatic
ago
center?
anyways, because I was originally on it.
Want the aquatic center, Mac, and I'll take them.
No, no, I don't.
Yeah, I've mentioned this to Josh too. I think I'm very grateful that golf has done so well on the last year before last and did okay last year, but it's still not making money. And so it is another layer of risk to add employees
Yeah.
to it.
And I appreciate the commission's hard work, and I know they go through that thing with a fine tooth comb, but their focus is the golf club, where they're all members, and our focus is the bigger picture, so that's why, again, like to make sure I can answer questions when these come up, so there is a 30,000, are we gonna?
It's in the budget right now. I would say before we move forward, that we'd have to say, yes, we can certainly move forward on that. I think it's certainly, you're able to approve the budget without necessarily approving the position, leaving it in there, and then reassessing down the line, are we actually ready to hire that person, if that makes
Okay,
sense?
I mean, I know we get recommendations, but I mean, there's still times we have to say no, right? I mean,
I would say yes, and I mean, until the person's hired, we have time to say no, and I'll make sure that the golf board knows that.
so that brings up another good point. Do you, if somebody on city staff were to leave, and I don't care what department it's in, just because we had an employee before, does that automatically, do you just automatically go and fill that out, or would you bring that to council to? Because I guess moving forward, I'd like to, as we look at costs and wages and everything else, I just want to make sure that we're addressing, we're just not filling positions because, oh, well, we've always had a position for that, when maybe, and I know you guys did some good work this year by combining 2 positions and saving us half of a salary, and I'm appreciative of that, and I know Tim worked hard to get that done, and he's not here
Yes.
tonight, but,
So generally, and even before me, I know, my predecessor brought him back to the council and said, hey, this position's open, this is what we want to advertise, can we move forward with this? Yeah, I mean, like you said, this year, I know, Tim was able to reduce one of his full-time positions down to a 3/4 position, and then in the finance department, we were able to basically restructure job duties, to, allow for the general fund or the city side to have less of an employee and the utilities commission have a larger portion of that employee, just by how things were working out. So we're able to save the city some money there as well. Basically, increasing the job duties of one person, to save the city money.
Yeah.
I guess on stuff that had been normally covered. But yes, to answer your question, if for some reason a parks employee was to find opportunity elsewhere, we'd bring it back to you and say, hey, we've got this opening, we'd like to move forward with it. And then there'd be another opportunity at some point before we then hire the person to say, hey, we'd like to bring back this person as we discussed this need. We believe this person fills that spot. Can we hire this person? So generally, you guys will see it twice then before the position is actually filled.
Okay, I just, and the reason I ask is, again, reading the Star Tribune, I was surprised that the city of Savage, that, you know, with 24,000 people versus our 8,500, they had combined, they had a public works director and a park, who was also public works and park director. You know, that just seemed like, and then, to be honest, the old system that we used to have, where we had one person overseeing everything, and just not trying to push Bruce out the door, but I think he's been very honest, he's gonna be retiring in a few years. I wanna make sure that we're looking at that, maybe we could put all that under Matt again in one person, or move somebody up to that position and create, I just wanna make sure that that's being addressed on
I will
all,
say-
we're looking at all opportunities, and it's not just going, well, this is the way it's always been, so that's what we're gonna do.
It's just, it's like in the private sector, you have an open requisition for a position, and there's a body that takes a look and says, okay, we're not going to keep that requisition open. It's closed, and we're not gonna backfill that job. And it's just based on, you know, obviously
of
business
everything,
and, yeah, a lot of everything, you know,
And I mean, and I think these
job
guys would attest, I
descriptions,
mean,
et cetera.
I've had conversations with any or all of them constantly about structure, organization, it doesn't make sense, and
Okay, good.
yeah, that is an ongoing, constant.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it right now, or I'm not trying to imply that. I
Yep.
just wanna look at all cost savings, so we can give 4% and
Yeah.
$250,000 in overall compensation benefit to our employees and keep us on track with everybody, because that's kind of the direction that it's going. But, one other question that I had that was brought up, and Bruce, this would be for you, and I meant to ask you the other day when you and I were talking, and I forgot. But I had heard that there was, within SIMPA, that there's gonna be some big cities that might be leaving and cutting into the production of would that increase our costs moving forward? I think it's not, they're scheduled in a year or two, I heard, but,
Actually, 2030.
oh, 2030, okay. So I'm just thinking long-term, if that's gonna be, now all of a sudden we have this
No,
much,
Rochester is planned to leave Simpa in 2030.
okay,
But they are, put it this way, they're limited to the amount of sales that are taken from Simpa currently. So it's not as big a hit as you might think. They're limited at 230 megawatts. So those have already been built into our forecast so that.
Oh, they have, okay.
things are stabilized, plus all the debt service rolls off here in a few years, so that compensation more than offsets it.
okay. I wasn't aware of that, and I heard Austin maybe leaving too, and I didn't know if there's some
They're on
other.
the fence.
Yeah.
Of deciding what they want.
So you were up to speed on this?
Well, yeah, but some of them too have been talking this for years.
Right.
I mean,
Well, it goes in about 20-year increments, Sean, where you have to make contract commitments to.
Okay.
Because of large financial investments in power plants or what have you. So that's kind of where that goes, 2030, 2050, and now we're actually gonna be working on a 2070 plan because of financial commitments that have to be made long-term.
Okay,
So those have all been baked into the rates, and we forecast it to be very stable.
okay. I just wanted to make sure we weren't gonna see any big jump next year, this year. I wasn't sure of the timetable. I didn't realize it was 2030, but
2030.
I just wanted to be prepared so we wouldn't.
let's, a little bit of extra education. So with this new bill, the carbon-free in 2030 or 2040.
Yep.
What Simpa's been doing
I
to.
think, looking at future energy costs, anytime you're gonna drive it all towards being renewables, that means we got not only buy all renewables in the state of Minnesota, but also those have to be backed up by iron on the ground, we call it, or what's called dispatchable power, so that those can be called on an evening or a day like today when there's low wind and no sun. So we forecast rates to probably go up a little bit because of it. I mean, I don't think it'll be as severe as your Californias and so that have done these same kind of mandates where their energy costs are close to 40 cents, and we're looking at 13 cents currently. So I hope it doesn't come to that, but it's definitely, renewables come at a cost. And it's gonna drive up utility or electric costs within the next few years.
Is there more nuclear plants for more nuclear plants?
See, they
Oh,
won't.
they won't.
discuss that.
There's moratorium on it in the state of Minnesota, you can't even
Yeah.
consider it.
Glad I bought my solar generators.
I don't know what they'll do. I mean, you start getting all these cars and stuff
It's
on it.
kinda, the outlook is kinda scary, to be honest. Yeah.
And I wasn't kidding about solar generators.
So one other note on the budget before we move on to the CIP. I did forward you guys all that email from Scott Riggs
Yes.
on Friday. That kind of was their written opinion on the various options going forward. Also included in that, so that may be a discussion we want to officially have. But that also included a letter that he recommended that Dwayne basically send to the commissioner requesting the ability to levy the 5.1 million that we had originally intended, just so that we can basically say that we have made sure we've exhausted that avenue. It wouldn't require us going up there, but that letter would basically be a letter from Dwayne to the commissioner. I do know that he said they at this point are basically expecting to receive a letter from New Prague, formally requesting it. He didn't know if they'd give us an answer by the end of the week, and maybe they wouldn't, but then at least we can say that we have reached out to them and done our part to try to request relief at this point.
Why would we need that if we've just agreed, or I think you'd have the majority of the council agree to this 4.8?
So I mean, I think the idea being that if for some reason the Department of Revenue tries to push back on this state statute, you can say, well, we did request relief through this and you never responded, or you denied us relief here. And so it is his way of basically saying it's as easy as putting this letter in the mail, just to make sure that you've now covered that avenue
Yeah.
of all things considered.
It's a good paper trail.
For whom, though?
Oh, it's for us, for showing that we did due diligence in trying every avenue.
Okay, I didn't think it was that big of an issue,
Well,
because
but-
we dropped it anyways, which I'm all happy for. And
Yeah,
I'm still
correct.
looking for, as I just threw out,
Yeah,
10,000 here,
But the
30,000 there.
Yeah, but the request has been made, contact has been made, and they're sitting on their haunches and not giving us a decision.
Okay.
So this is, just an effort to. have
and it's
another
either
meeting.
gonna set precedents or not set precedents, one of the two.
I think it's good that we're able to say to our residents that we did it.
That we did it, and that the state, I look at it, the state said no, and that's your state for you.
It could be that they might not say no, they might not give us an answer.
Or give us an
It's
answer.
possible they don't give us
Just
an
not
answer,
doing
or it's
their
possible
job.
that they say yes, but with that, I mean, at this point, we've got our budget set through here, so even if they say yes, I guess then that would at least leave us the choice of what we wanna do with it, instead of,
Okay,
being told what to do.
right. I was approaching it from the other way, that I was more than happy to tell people that it wasn't 5.1, and regardless, we drove it to 4.8. And still are looking, so, I mean,
But then we could probably go lower. Right now, we can't go lower than 4.8.
Yeah, so.
Yeah,
I mean,
we can go
yeah,
lower.
It is certainly not saying that we would levy 5.1, it is just giving us the ability to and putting the choice in
right,
our
but
hands.
we could go lower than 4.81. When I'm throwing out this $30,000 here and this.
Correct.
If we wanted to, we could cut
In-
the
in-
police car, we could
Yes,
cut the front end
if
loader
they
from
give us-
parks.
If
We
they
could-
give us the okay,
In-
but if they
I was
don't,
gonna say, in my mind, this becomes more of a local control, and do we believe that we should be able to set our levy as intended, or do we believe the state should set it where it was erroneously set?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that is all, it's not saying we're going to change it, it's just kind of finishing out that paper trail,
yeah,
however it lands. And so, but if kind of going with this, not certifying a levy is where the council certainly wants to go, I will already plan to talk to Scott Riggs tomorrow morning about, okay, what are the next steps that staff and or the city council should take to make sure we do this in the
Correctly.
appropriate manner.
I feel we definitely need to do that, but at the same time, send this letter.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I guess at this point, I would recommend.
we're still
if
doing
that's how we
two.
wanna do, I would recommend we do both.
Yeah, and I would be for that too, just because I know this council was trying to drive it down, and it's not gonna pop right back up, even if he gave us the letter worked, and he gave us a
Yep.
5.1, that all of a sudden we just say, okay, let's go to that.
Yeah, correct.
Right, I feel confident that, yeah.
I know Bruce has a lot of red markings on questions on the letter, so let's go and address your.
The first comment, I guess, is just did the county actually adopt a levy resolution for our levy amount? Do they actually go through a process like that? And that's more just curiosity, but
Yes, so that
The
I'm not 100% sure on
that's what
that.
the letter says, whatever. My real question, I guess, is getting into the memo that the attorney sent. And the bullet point number 2 talks about we have to certify the levy amount by December 28th, and if we don't, and the complications that might arise because of that might be unable to complete a report on taxes levied to the Commission of Revenue. And I'm just wondering if staff feels that if we did go that route and we can't not certify a levy until December 28th, if I understand this correctly, we have 2 days then to actually complete this form that has to go to the state by December 30th. Is staff able to do that on those 2 days?
Yep, so I mean, we would have more than, the 2 days would be the deadline, I would say,
Yeah.
in that case. And so if we decided to go that route, basically our last scheduled meeting would be December 18th. And so on December 19th, if we haven't certified a levy, we have no scheduled meeting to certify a levy at that point. And so
Right.
we'd be able to fill out paperwork. And Scott and I actually talked about the paperwork today and how that would look. And he did not feel that there would be an issue with how it got filled out. He was fully confident that we'd have no problem filling out the paperwork going forward.
I mention it because he says the city might be unable to, so that's.
And he mentioned it in here because when they started talking about this with the state, I think it was a Department of Revenue employee who said, well, how are you gonna fill out the paperwork without certifying a levy? And he said, well, in the same way as if city council was fighting and they didn't pass the levy, we'd fill out the paperwork using the information that we ultimately have from last year's because state statute guides us to use last year's. And he said they kind of stopped talking at that point, but, so, yeah, like I said, it mentions it in here only, I think, because a Department of Revenue person brought it up, but he did not feel that it would be a problem.
Because then I look at that letter, or what he wrote in there, there's an actual drop dead date of January 30th.
Yeah,
That paperwork has, otherwise we could
potentially
some of our
lose LGA.
LGA.
Yeah, we would have certainly no problem getting it in by January 30th. I think we usually submit that stuff either right after the levy's adopted or like that first week of the new year. So, end of December.
Okay.
The last part when he talks about the notice, the city should plan to alert residents of the error and the new estimated tax levy amounts as soon as possible. Dun, dun, dun. But then I'm wondering, how do we do this when the amount isn't known until we fail to pass the levy on December 28th?
So,
So.
yep, so we talked about that today as well, and he basically said that, basically we'd have a letter put together that we'd basically be reverting back to last year's, and then on December 19th, that letter would go out to residents. It would certainly, I mean, Christmas season, who knows when they're able to get it, but it would be alerting people as soon as possible. That notice is not necessarily required by state statute, as far as I'm aware. And so we'd also probably be putting it out on the various social media channels and websites, like basically trying to get the word out, as well as individually mailing it to everybody.
So we wouldn't be sending out, this is what your estimated property tax.
It wouldn't be, and it wouldn't be individual amounts. We don't have that information for individual. We'd be sending out the letter stating being reverted to last year's, and while it won't be exactly the same as last year's because valuations have changed a little bit, new houses have been built, it'll be very similar to last year's. And that's another one that he did not feel was a problem when I was talking to him, and we'd certainly be working with Kennedy and Graven to make sure we got went through with their recommendations on how to proceed with this.
Why would we notify the citizens? We don't notify them individually about our certified tax levy. If there's something in the newspaper.
I believe the notification is coming because it is different than what the because it would not meet the expectations of what they got on their tax statement under normal circumstances would be the highest that their taxes would be coming from the city. And so because it doesn't meet those standards, he recommends that we would notify everybody.
Because it increased.
Yeah, because it would be an increase over
From
that
three
number.
point eight or whatever.
Yeah,
to-
instead of a 3.9 million, it's a 4.8 million. And so because it does not meet the expectations, yes, in a normal year we don't, because the expectation is that number is as high as it's gonna go. And so because it doesn't meet those expectations, we would basically be notifying them of why it doesn't meet those expectations.
There's a lot of people that were surprised, and especially in the real estate area, realtors and stuff, and those people communicated, so they have an expectation, like you say, that's inaccurate. So I think we owe it to them to
So it's,
at least,
say it's
Tell
not
'em.
gonna be,
it's not gonna be what you think.
yeah.
But the way you commented, send a notice after the 19th, how can we do it at that day when you have until the 28th? And conceivably, we could hear from the department on the 20th and decide that we're going to have a levy of X amount.
So
Don't we have to wait until the 28th to send a notice to the residents?
I mean, I know when I asked Scott the question, he said there was some argument in his office that if we're intending to do it, we could send notice tomorrow to the residents. I think,
And so if the department comes back and says, okay, you can do it, we're not gonna do it?
I mean, then that would be the question for the council. Like, if it would rather I hold off and wait because we might hear, then we will certainly hold off on the notices. I know that, at least from the discussions I've heard thus far, is that people seemed like they were kind of happy with where the 4.8 was landing, regardless of what happened to the letter, is kind of what was.
But that's not my take.
Okay.
I think maybe what you felt from me was just relief that we didn't have to go back to the other number.
The 3.9.
Right. That wasn't,
Okay.
that's where I was coming
And-
from.
and I-
But
and I-
I'm
I
just
can
suggesting
certainly-
that we shouldn't eliminate our
Yeah.
alternatives or flexibility.
Okay, and I will say, for some reason, if we get a letter on the 27th or whatnot saying that we can, we would have to then have a city council meeting, obviously,
Official.
on the 28th to pass the new levy, that sort of thing, so. But yeah, I mean,
Don't you have to give 3 days notice?
No.
we have to give 3 days notice.
Oh,
under
unless it's a
normal
special.
circumstances.
Oh,
But this
If-
would probably be an emergency.
If it falls under emergency, then the mayor has the ability to call an emergency at a moment's notice.
Okay.
Basically, as long as we make good faith effort to contact all the media.
And maybe I'm not thinking through the math all the way though, but the reason that we may want to do that is that there's structural expenses we have in here. They're going to cause us, even though it's not going to be as gigantic increase as we had thought for next year, we would be able to reduce the increase for next year.
I was saying, and yeah, I mean, I think that'll be a conversation that we have over the year, of this is what we're certainly looking like this could be, and it's potential that it comes in a little bit higher than kind of where we normally see, as we work through those different operational service type stuff as to what it looks like going forward. It's always that possibility. But yes, I will, I mean, I'll certainly keep in contact with you guys. Like I said, I had planned, talk to Scott today, and he said, let me know how tonight goes.
So we should send that letter, is what I'm understanding, that to the commissioner.
That is
Either
certainly
way.
Scott's recommendation, to say, let's get that letter sent off tomorrow to
Either
the
way, okay.
commissioner. And him and I will talk about going forward with the 4.8, assuming we don't hear back from the commissioner. And I will also talk with him, well, what if we actually do hear back from the commissioner at this point? What are the council's options? And how long he recommends holding off on stuff.
Okay. Let's get going.
All right, let's move on
Okay.
Where are you moving?
Oh,
No, where are we moving to?
to the capital.
I'll say
Oh,
capital
okay.
improvement, there was one in your packet. We did have an updated one, that I put in there, that should be in front of you there.
So this is different than what was in the packet?
This is different, yes, there are
Okay.
numbers updated. Of note, on the first page, for the inspection vehicle replacement, a 15,000 was added way out in 2032. Just off of the general cycle, Ken said that usually the worn-out vehicles generally get traded in and or replaced that far out.
And shouldn't the 10,000 be in 24 for the furniture?
Yep, so that I think we can certainly put in there. The reason why the 10,000 didn't make it in is I've always operated under the policy of CIPs generally contain things that you would consider as assets over and above $5,000. And since none of the furniture, crossing my fingers that none of the furniture down there cost more than $5,000 for a single piece, it didn't seem to fall under that category. But if the city council would like to include the 10,000 in 2024 furniture or desk chair replacement.
My history in bookkeeping is if it's purchases one unit, totals the 10,000.
Then it would be?
Would be, but in my mind, however you think that should be done, but I would like to see the capital improvement numbers match the budget under capital.
Okay.
When they don't match, it just drives me to keep looking at paper, and I don't
Yep.
like doing that. But so if we match up is what I'm more concerned about. If you feel that the 10,000 is an expense, that gets to be a big number for a general expense number.
Yeah, and like I said, it was more an expense because you may buy 5 desks and 4 chairs with that instead of one single desk at $10,000. But
I'm pretty sure if you were an individual business, you would be depreciating $10,000 if you had the choice instead of expense.
okay, yeah, I mean we can certainly work that in there and show it on here.
Okay.
The other one being that crime prevention, we updated that. It originally, I believe, said body cameras to 2017. Those are the TASER body cameras that we're replacing this year, spread out at 28,000, a little over 28,000.
Over 5 years.
Over 5 years, and then I just 5 years later updated it by 20% just to throw it on there. But hopefully that number will obviously be updated as we actually learn the actual numbers 5 years from now. We just don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now.
Let's hope it's 20% the way they jumped.
Yes. On the next page, page 2 at the bottom, updated the radios number from 20,000 to 25,000 for 2024, just to reflect the actual spending. On page 3,
Oh, wait. I
at the very bottom.
skipped over electric, though. I just wanted to see
Yep.
the distribution system upgrade, Bruce. What,
40%.
do you know what that, I'm just kinda curious, what would that, what,
Hit your button.
No, I typically allow about we spend around $400,000 a year in distribution upgrades.
okay,
And that's pretty consistent. You can see that going forward, although with the expense, how things have grown in expense, including like transformers and wire and so on, nearly tripled in price. I foresee going forward that those numbers are gonna have to be adjusted upward somewhat, but 400,000 is about, Sean, what we spend every year in
it is,
distribution.
okay, and I see that here, but I was just kinda curious on what, if there was one big project that we were working
No,
on or
it's-
something like that.
It's spread out through all of our projects.
Okay, and then, the number 5 generator, can you give us a update on that? Is it, that's the one
We
that
had
was?
actually had that budgeted in 2 years ago in regards to replacing a generator. What it is a black start generator at the power plant. That unit's used when we lose power coming into the city so that we can start the plant when it's dead. I know for a fact that the reason it's spread over 2 years, Sean, is because I can't get that unit, and even if I ordered it today, I can't get it in a year.
Oh,
So
I
we're
see.
gonna do some of the preliminary work this year and then balance in the following year. So the
Okay.
total project's about $600,000.
Okay, so that isn't the one that happens to be down now, or that was leaking oil or something that I'd heard about? Oh, okay.
Nope.
So, can you give me an update on that, though? Because I did have someone ask me about that they had heard.
So,
that there was-
we just had, what we had is filter plugging, and what we found to be is that it was actually some of the internal paint of the unit was coming
Oh,
loose
that's right, somebody said
and
that.
plugging filters. Staff has cleaned that, and we put in, a pre-filter now, and actually oil tests have come back surprisingly good.
Okay.
So, we foresee that being an issue that we'll be able to deal with. And that's actually a contract unit, so all of that expense is borne by Simpa.
Oh, it is, okay, so that won't affect the city budget
The whole
whatsoever.
plant is contract by Simpa, so that, all those facilities are covered totally in their O&M.
Okay, all right. Okay, that was my only question on electric. Where were we, radios or fire?
Yeah, so under fire, 2024 radios, that number originally was 20,000. That was updated to 25 just to reflect what is in the current budget. And then the next change over the other packet would have been under golf. Golf cars, originally was 120,000. I believe the bid that is being considered is for 186,000, and so I updated that number there to reflect that. And then on the next page, the $130,000 for the park sidewalks and trails, 130,000. That whole line hadn't been in there before, so I added it in. Of note, I know that Bruce had asked about spending wise, so within the, about kind of where their funding comes from and that sort of thing and what was in the budget. So basically, the other projects that are being, we'll say, affected by the levy at this point, or the general fund out of the park board, were the picnic tables for $10,000, the lighting and the landscaping for $3,000 and $2,000 for a total of $15,000. The other projects on there, the Settlers Park native prairie grass, that is a paid-for grant reimbursement type project, and we've already started some of the work, and we'll plan on completing it in 24. We're getting there, 24.
And I just had a resident that it affects, living on 9th Street there. Very upset at that. Could you fill me in just so I can get an answer to them? Was that, I thought it might be part of the grant that we initially got, or when was that decision made? Was that brought to council too? That we were gonna do
Yeah.
this tractic?
Yeah,
I didn't recall it,
I
but,
don't, Matt probably have more info exactly when that whole grant process went through.
Yep, it was early spring, we started the grant. This is the second time we actually applied for the grant.
okay,
Probably about 5 years ago, we did not get it. This year we did get it, and that did come to the council for approval. We sent out letters 2 months ago to all residents with a map showing everything that's gonna be done, kind of the description of the work that's gonna be happening. We didn't receive any phone calls from that. We actually received our first phone call last Thursday from one resident, and then I talked to one today about it. Just kind of wondering what was happening. She said she got the letter, but still was just kind of curious and had a few questions.
can you just fill me in a little bit, cause it made it sound like they just kinda clear cutted a bunch of trees and now they can, where they kind of felt like they had some privacy through that trail and stuff, now they can see right through to
Yep.
12th Street or whatever, and,
Yeah, that area was never designed to have what it looked like for the last 10 years. That has always been designed to be prairie grass, but over the many years of that being there, what we call pond trees or noxious trees kind of just popped up. Completely unhealthy trees that you don't actually want in your area.
okay.
To keep your good. There's a couple, well, I shouldn't say a couple, there's probably 10 oak trees that are gonna be staying in that area. There's some maple trees that we're not cutting down. So we're keeping the natural trees, the healthy trees there, and getting rid of all the other ones, which there's a lot. It completely changed the look of it.
Yeah,
I mean,
But
that was
it-
a
I was
surprise.
gonna say, I mean, a lot of those trees were about this far apart and were basically like, there was zero health in those trees that were in there.
Yeah, and
Unsightly besides.
yeah, I didn't,
It
again,
is completely different.
I haven't driven by it yet, so, then the other question was, if I can just, so I can get back to them, is that big rock staying?
We are trying to move it.
Oh,
I'm not promising anything because we've tried to move it once and failed, so.
yeah, I wonder if, I only talked to one neighbor, but it sounded like they're pretty close and they wanted to keep that rock if they could. And they were concerned that not only did we clear cut, and I get it, a bunch of noxious trees now, but I think they were a little worried that that rock would be moved too, and I don't know if there's any, I haven't driven by it yet, I just heard this
The rock is,
a couple days ago. Is
Probably
it,
one of the biggest rocks I've ever seen.
yeah.
I'm not even joking, it's
But I think
huge.
people would like to see that incorporated into,
And it could, not saying it's not going
into
to.
the design if at all possible.
It might have to, exactly, but
Okay.
There may not
And
be
you
an
won't
Which
option.
would be good. I'm just passing that information
you
on
won't
to
see the
guys.
rock when that area is healthy again. I mean, the prairie grass will be 3.5 feet tall, 4
Oh,
feet tall. I
okay.
mean, it will look really nice when it's all done. It's just, it does look completely different and kind of.
It was shocking, I think.
So is everybody gonna keep the rock? Because I always wanted to break one of them in half.
If you can break it in half, that would help us move it, Rick.
Yeah, we could light it up on fire.
So, and I think the other thing was, so did you used to mow around it, and now if that's native prairie grass, that will not be mowed around?
It
Is
will
that-
not be mowed around it, no.
Have you been mowing it before?
Yes.
Oh,
It was kind of a fun thing for kids to walk around to.
yeah, no, that was the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing from the neighbors, is that they wanted to keep that rock, cause their kids grew up on it, jumped on it, and now they got grandkids that jump and play on it, and they take pictures and,
Yeah, we won't be mowing any of that when it's all natural prairie grass. I mean,
okay, so that'll,
Other than mowing it for maintaining over the year, you know, like maybe once every,
no, it sounds like it's gonna be
No.
covered
no,
up.
natural prairie grass you do not touch.
I'll say,
Oh, I thought you
the
mowed
idea
or
would be
burned
be
it every
natural as
so many.
possible.
We will cut, one path around the path, just on each side. Other than that, no, it will not be touched at all. It's,
Oh. thought
I know
you
it
just had to
sounds,
do that.
I mean,
No,
once
but
you
I
see
thought
it,
you
it does
had a-
look really nice, but it does take 2 or 3 years for it actually to fill in.
And when you say prairie grass, is it like a little blue stem and?
There's 30 different types of grasses that will be. The only reason I know, because the resident that asked me what the list was. I'm like, I can list it, but there's 30 different natural prairie grasses, and I couldn't name half of them because I couldn't. I didn't
Sure.
know. I couldn't read it.
But that rock will be obscured by it, cause it'll be that tall, and there'll be no access for kids to get on it and play it without going
walk out
through
to-
the tall prairie grass.
Yep. But it is on it's on public property.
No, yeah, no, I know that,
Yeah.
but they're taxpayers too, and that's part of their property, and,
Yep.
like I said, I think a lot of the residents really liked that. So I don't, and they were concerned that it was gonna be moved, and now I can tell them it's gonna be moved, but you're
I'm
not
not
gonna
saying it's
see
gonna
it.
be moved. We tried 15 years ago and was not able to.
No, I know, they were concerned that you, along with this project, you were gonna take that rock out. They'll be happy that it's there, they're gonna be unhappy that their kid, they can't go out and play on it, and
If they can move it, they can have it.
Not a bad idea, Rick.
anyways, that answers that question, so
Okay.
that's happened to be there. so.
Yep, and then just the other one there, the dog park contribution.
Yep, I need to ask about that.
The dog park contribution was coming from the park development fees that they've collected. As homes get built, they have to pay into a park development fee. And Meg can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the dog park contribution is coming from those development.
Absolutely.
So those development fees by law, it might even be federal law, I believe.
I know it's state law.
Have to be spent on new park improvements. You can't use them
Right.
for maintaining existing parks, so.
No, I understand.
That is what,
35,000 for that, huh?
I'm just,
That's not all of it.
I'm questioning so where are we at on that dog park?
Just keeps growing, huh?
It's
Well, I think it's over 70.
moving forward.
Yeah, so we're actually.
They
we met
raised
with
the
dog-
money, the group?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I thought there was a group that was trying to raise money or is that gonna come out of the city budget moving forward?
No, so we met with them last week because there's actually, Kira's working on a T-Mobile grant that can help pay for some of it. I'm not gonna say how much, who knows? So we're working through that, but yeah, the park board kinda, I mean, Maggie probably could answer more of what the park board has discussed, but there's actually 2 phases of the dog park. The one is just kind of to get it started, and then there's a second phase that they would like to do a picnic shelter out there and all that. So, yeah, the park board would be paying for majority of it, is what,
Yeah, but it's coming out of a designated fund, so it's
Right.
not coming out of general fund.
No, I'm talking moving forward, cause I know there was talks of having it fenced and then there was
Yes.
one fence for a small
Yes.
dogs and a small, big
Yes.
dogs. And that was gonna come out of, and that was $1 million deal or something,
No,
wasn't it?
not
no, the
even
first
close.
I don't
phase
know.
is like 55,000.
Oh, yeah, I thought it was
s-
70,000 or something.
Yeah, and then the total grant was like 110, but that was like the wish list. They decided to take a few things out here and there. So,
Okay,
Yeah,
it was
so
a-
phase 1 is just gonna be fencing
right?
and a gravel parking
parking lot.
area. That's it.
But moving forward, should I expect more of that to come out of the general fund, that the
No.
park board's gonna ask more money, or is this gonna come all out of
There's donations. that
the
have already
donations and the
paid.
development fees?
Started donating to it, too.
They have
From
not
individual.
done donations yet, though. They are looking at, that last week they said they have not moved forward with the donations yet, but they're gonna start here. So, they might have reached out in the last week, but
They've gotten at least the first one I'm aware of, so.
did it come from you?
Hey, I was
Oh,
gonna say-
okay.
I was gonna say, it sounds like Bruce is.
Yeah.
No, I'm involved in they're donating it to Forward New Prague, and we have a separate fund started for it.
Okay, yeah, when we met with them, they said they were gonna
Yep.
started donating.
So it's not coming out of the general fund.
Right.
No, but what I'm talking about, moving forward though, is this gonna be something that we're gonna have to, maintenance is gonna be all the city out of the general fund, or is that gonna come out of, as this community grows, gonna come out of this fund that we can use for new parks, and
So-
would that classify as a new park?
I was gonna say, so I think by the very classification, you can't use this for maintenance of existing parks.
Yeah.
The development park fees.
So then ultimately, we will be burdened with the upkeep and maintenance of this park.
Yes.
Correct. And that, I mean, along that's any park. And so if we were to have a developer come in and build 200 houses and require them to build a park in the middle of it, that park would get dedicated to the city generally, and then maintenance would then be on us. going
Right,
forward.
no, I understand that. And I don't wanna get too far off topic, but I've had people talk about the new, the
The pops, that's
the
gonna be.
pops thing and the
CFO.
ongoing maintenance there, and all of a sudden, a windstorm takes it down, yeah, they raised the money for it, but now they're gonna saddle the residents with the upkeep of it. And who knows what that's gonna be. I just wanna make sure I can answer those
Well, be
questions.
careful of the words you're using. I do not appreciate being saddled or using that word.
Oh,
I mean, for
okay.
our parks that we're creating in New Prague, no one saddled us with the parks that we're creating. That's part of the responsibility of the city to provide.
Okay, I'll change my word, but they just wanted to know who is gonna do the upkeep, this group that's raising the money, and they're gonna produce this, and that, I don't know what the percentage of people really, who wants, but then what is the ongoing cost gonna be to the taxpayer?
That we
Just
don't-
like the dog
yeah,
park.
We don't know yet, but, and I mean, that's the idea right now with the pops facility.
Well, the
It's-
city
That's what I
council
can
has already
ask.
responded that is how it's gonna
Oh,
work, so.
okay.
No,
it's not new information to
No, it's not
anybody.
new information. I'm not saying I'm not against the dog park, and I'm not against the pops,
Right.
the facility. The question came to me, is this gonna affect the taxpayers moving forward, or is this group gonna also raise money and, is the city gonna have to pay for the bands that perform there? Is the city gonna have, they just wanna know how that's gonna
Yep, so
affect their
I think
levels.
generally the idea is that the city would take on maintenance. Now, it may be a situation like we've had, whether it's the North Side Basketball, facility where, somebody donated brand new hoops for up there. We've had the, Youth Baseball Association want to see improved dugouts on a couple of the fields they've donated. And so
Right.
I think we would take on the maintenance for sure, and if for some reason a group of dog owners wanted to see a higher, shinier fence, then we can say, you may certainly donate and raise the money for that. But I think it would generally be expected that the city would take on maintenance of what is built out there.
Right, and again, to Bruce's point, whether the word that he used, saddled, there's plenty of people that don't ice skate, right? But yet we have that, and there's plenty of people that, or play softball, or or golf, right? So, no, I get that. Again, when this came up, seemed, a lot of people had the impression that this was gonna be almost a private event they were going out raising money and whatnot. I got that clarification, thank you, I can let them know.
And that's gonna be at Settlers Park, is it? No.
No, I think the plan is for that to be just south of the, Public Works facility.
Yeah,
There-
up by
there's-
the treatment
there's a-
plant.
There's a extremely wide strip of grass there right along, geez, what road is that?
About 3 acres, just east of the Public Works / waste treatment plant's driveway,
All right,
just south of the big pond.
not back there by where the, goats hang out.
Nope, the goats will still be there.
So it is not gonna be by the bowling alley, because that's one of the things that I'd
You're
heard too.
talking about
No,
pops.
Oh, I'm talking pops.
Oh, I thought you
You're
were
talking the
about
dog park, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
I'm mixing up.
Yeah, so what is the
Pops
status
hasn't
on
been
that?
decided yet.
It
So
hasn't.
it's
That's
decided where-
undecided.
Hasn't been
Okay.
decided.
Okay,
Can we move on, please?
Yes.
No, I have some questions.
I know.
I know you wanna
you-
get out of here, I do too, I don't like being here any more than you do.
Well,
but
it's just,
I have questions that I'm trying to get answered, so
like to
thank you.
talk
I think you
numbers.
do.
Okay, so the only other change on the CIP in front of you comes in the police department on page 6. And that one was, updating, numbers for the squad car install. We'd only gone out to 28 at that point. And so that was just talking to Tim. We know that if we're buying cars, we're gonna have to install stuff, so throwing that numbers out there. We had discussed, potentially having to replace handguns in the future, and so that number was, thrown on there for, discussion to continue into 25. And then, the typo that has now been fixed, but I wasn't gonna print them all off again, the squad car cameras, under the police department. That number was put on there. But that may again be a payment system. Really, it's just the cameras have been in the cars for a number of years now, and the current contract will be up at the end of 25. So
Okay.
that is the changes from what would have been in there, but we can certainly talk about the rest of it too if you'd like.
Well, question, 18,000 for handguns, I mean, there's 12 officers, right?
So
10 officers?
that was basically
Every new one?
Yep, so that was estimating, and granted, these are conservative, especially in a plan, we'd rather be a little high, and then this number will adjust as we got closer. With the, I'm talking to, both Tim and Sergeant Cuthbert, was the estimated on the gun and the various, I'll say, accessories that go with that gun. He said we would certainly, and that they very conservatively estimated about $1,600 a gun. They said we'd likely be, trading in or disposing of our guns in a way that could potentially yield us back at least $300 a gun, so that knocks the price down.
Okay. I just didn't realize it'd be $1,600 a piece.
And yeah, so,
Oh, yes.
and like I said, that's high, so the hope is that we can come in way under that number, but since we're planning for it out, we'd rather talk in a high number and pull it back than be surprised and have to go up.
So anytime you get a new gun, you also have to get a number of magazines because they're
Right,
carrying multiple, and all of that is very expensive.
right, okay. They use bigger and nicer guns than I use.
Apparently I pronounced his last name wrong. I've been informed by the HR, so I'll probably be getting written up for that, but
Oh, yeah.
it was Sergeant Culbreth, not Cuthbert.
Oh,
Yeah,
Same letters.
Same letters, they all come out to be the same.
okay, then the 2024 visioning plan.
Yes, that visioning plan, mostly has gone unchanged. I will put on 2025, the comp study that we had discussed earlier, so we can keep talking about, doing that. And the other addition would be in 2025 to, look at, potentially early on in the year, doing a strategic plan to kind of help guide the city council, the boards and staff on decision-making. So along the lines of when new projects come into town, or they're trying to think of things they wanna do with the city, or even down to a budget, like what are we trying to do with the budget this year? Are we looking at, do we want to try to focus spending on increasing commercial development, or sending money to the park system, or maybe housing projects, that sort of thing. Really doing a strategic plan process is bringing somebody in to help guide all of us in a discussion, and then to give us tangible working stuff that as a company, top to bottom, we all kind of know we're on the same page working for this mission and or goal moving forward. So that is in 2025, and we'll certainly be talking about whether we will do that in 2026, or throughout 2024 here, whether we want to continue down that path. So, but other than that, the visioning hasn't really changed since the last time you saw it, unless there's anything that you all would like to potentially add or take away.
I didn't see anything that popped out right away. Okay, anything else?
I don't believe I have anything else at this point. I will get with you tomorrow about
Yeah.
that document, and then keep you guys updated on my conversations that I have with Scott.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Well, I would take a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Okay, Rick and Sean, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passed.
Josh, can you shred this stuff for me? Yeah. I printed mine off. I don't like to see that paper